she feels the pressure of needing to be a good mom, needing to be a good business owner, needing to be a good veterinarian, and needing to be a good spouse. And that's a lot of stress on her. It's a lot of stress on me. We struggle with it still today. And being able to communicate is really, really important. So,
welcome to Vet Life Reimagined. What's it like to be married to a veterinarian? How is a high school teacher uniquely prepared for running a veterinary hospital? These questions are answered in this episode. In perfect timing for Valentine's Week, our guest gives us a unique perspective of being married to a veterinarian, as well as becoming a practice manager and co-owner of a thriving veterinary practice. Michael Shirley has a diverse animal background and is a former agriculture education teacher, now practice manager and co-owner of Family Pet Health, a 5-doctor fear-free practice in Murfreesboro, Tennessee. From meeting in high school at a veterinary clinic to building Family Pet Health together, Michael shares how they've created something special by combining her medical expertise with his talent for team building and education. Michael shares how his high school teaching experience translates perfectly into creating clear protocols, building strong teams, and fostering a positive culture where everyone feels valued. He offers candid insights about the challenges of practice ownership, working alongside your spouse, and the importance of having rock-solid systems and core values to guide your decisions. Whether you're thinking about practice ownership, looking to strengthen your team culture, or just curious about what it takes to build a thriving veterinary practice alongside your life partner, this episode is packed with practical wisdom and heartfelt stories. Michael is so fun to talk to, so let's get to the conversation about love, leadership, and learning with Michael Shirley. I saw that you did go to college for animal science. So do you mind sharing a little bit about, you growing up and getting an interest in animals enough to at least major in it in high school?
Sure, yeah. Well, yeah,
college.
Sure. It's actually a very kind of a cool story. So for those of you out there that don't know me, my name is Michael Shirley. I am not a veterinarian. I am married to the veterinarian. I spent my career in agriculture education. So my interest in agriculture and animal science started in the 4th grade when 4-H came to my school, and they passed out, this was a long time ago, they passed out all those project books. And so I had my project book and I saw all the different projects that kids could be involved in. And I went home and I was like, Mom, I want to have a cow and a horse and some chickens and pigs. And like, this is awesome. And she said, Michael, we live in the neighborhood in the middle of the city. We cannot have those things. And I was really sad, but I was like, but we own a farm. And she's like, yeah, but we don't live on that land. It's far away. But what happened was that our neighborhood backed up to a horse farm. And so they let me join the 4-H Horse and Pony Club. And I went to all those meetings. And then I got my first horse when I was 11 years old. And I also got my first job. I was 11 years old and I went to work at our family's grocery store. And I started bagging groceries at 11 years old. You can look at my Social Security contributions started when I was in 1990. And I've been paying the tax man ever since. So I just knew that I wanted to be a veterinarian. Like, I just thought that was cool because I loved all animals and I just really enjoyed that. So I was involved in 4-H all the way through middle school. And then for high school, I wanted to be in theater. I love acting. And my middle school that I went to is a private school. They did not have theater. So I convinced my parents that I wanted to go to our zoned public high school because they had theater. And when I got there, I found out that they wouldn't let freshmen take theater. So I joined the ag program instead. And because I was like, oh, I got to find something in my schedule. And I got involved with FFA, and the rest is history, as they say. I knew that I wanted to, again, still was tracking to become a veterinarian. My first job outside of our family's grocery store, the day I turned 18, I started working for Dr. David Harris, who's a local veterinarian. And that's actually where I met my wife. So the story is I went to college to major in animal science to be a veterinarian. While I was at Dr. Harris's office, I know exactly where I was standing and what I was doing the first time I saw my wife. She came around the corner with one of our clients who was introducing her to Dr. Harris. And I was like, oh, yes, please hire her. She's beautiful. And I had to go back to work at my family's grocery store because my dad fell and hurt his back. So I had to go and be the night manager. And Dr. Harris actually hired Amy, my wife, to replace me. And Fast forward a few years, my wife graduated veterinary school. I did not go to veterinary school because I did not like to study. I liked the social life of college much more than the book. And so, but Dr. Harris actually performed our wedding.
Oh,
Yeah, so he's a good mentor of both of ours. So we just try to be like him, you know? So my wife, she graduated veterinary school. We got married 2 weeks after that, and she started working as a small animal veterinarian about a couple weeks after that. And she stayed at that practice for 10 years. I started my career in agriculture education. And then one day she came home and said she wanted to open her own vet practice. And I asked her, like, what do you need from me? And she said, I don't know. And I said, well, I can't help with that. But
stay tuned.
yeah. So when she started describing what she needed help with, and I said, why do you want to start your own practice? And she said, I want to create the type of work environment where I want to go to work every day. And I want to surround myself with people with whom I want to work every day. And I said, now that I can help with, because that's team building and marketing and culture. And that's what I do every day in my classroom. Right. And so I can help with that. So what I have done is when we first started, I was teaching full time. We started our vet clinic. She was the doctor full time. And then I would come in after school and help with the HR and the business and the marketing and making sure that she had everything she needed in order to get her job done. And that has grown into today. We have a brand new hospital. We've been in there about a year and a half now. We have 5 full-time DVMs and about 24 full-time employees. And I am no longer teaching full-time anyway, but my classroom now is our vet clinic. So that is a 25-year history in a few minutes, 5
Yes.
minutes.
And I want to dig in. So
Okay.
let's go back a little bit. So everybody kind of knows like the high level part of the story, but I really want to dig in more into your path because, one of the things you mentioned when we were emailing is some of the things that you learned being a high school teacher and how that has helped you where you are today. So going back, you mentioned you have interest in the ag side of things. You mentioned theater, and then, of course, you end up teaching. So how do all of those interests play out? Did you eventually get into theater and any fun stories there?
Yeah. Well, I'm actually, as soon as we end this podcast episode recording, my daughter and I have to go to rehearsal because my daughter is 13 and she loves theater. And I took her to her last audition and I left with a part as well. So I am it's Sherlock Holmes and it's a musical. Oh God. And I'm the evil character, Sherlock Holmes' nemesis, and my daughter is my evil sidekick. So we should have a lot of fun with that.
I bet. Yeah.
Yeah, my daughter is very much like me, and so much to my wife's chagrin.
Yeah.
So
Well, but how did you start getting interest in teaching agriculture and what were you because you mentioned like, oh, that's what I do in my classroom when you talked like marketing and,
yeah,
I do have some family members who are teachers, but I don't think of marketing, as the
right.
first thing I think of. So share a little bit more about your interest in teaching and kind of what you were learning during that period.
So while the last year that Amy was in vet school, I needed to get a job because I need to work while we're figuring out where she's going to work. And I knew that we would end up ultimately moving to wherever she found a job, right? And I took a job as an animal control officer in our county. So I was a full-time animal control officer out on the road doing the investigations and all that kind of stuff. So that's what I was doing when we got married. Now, how did that end up in the ag ed? Well, so when I was at animal control, I started community outreach programs. Like I knew that the secret to fixing some of the problems that we were dealing with was to talk to the kids. That's where you got to go, right? They're the ones they're the ones that are pliable, like you. And so get the message to them and they'll get it to their parents. So I started community outreach programs with our animal control center with the schools. And then one day, through the county email system, it sent out an email that the extension office was hiring for a 4-H agent. And I was like, oh my gosh, that's an awesome job. And Amy had already found a job in Murfreesboro, so we knew we were going to be here. And so when that came across, I applied for it. And that's how I started in ag education, was originally with the extension service. And I worked there for 8 years as a 4-H agent, planting that seed of agriculture education, or love for agriculture, with kids in the 4th through the 12th grade, teaching citizenship, leadership, and life skills, and marketing our program to the community, like what we were doing. And then, like, trying to get people to come to the fair and buy and sponsor the kids to do their project animals, and working with community partners to build relationships in our community, where I could take education into different community groups like the Boys and Girls Club or our local community centers after school for programming, and building our livestock programs up and all that kind of stuff, working with the school teachers as well. And one day I was at a hog show down in Perry, Georgia, with my son, and my phone rang, and it was the local high school principal who was calling to ask me if I would come and lead his agricultural program, the animal science part of his agricultural program at the high school. And I was like, yeah, actually, I would be very interested in learning more about that, because my oldest son was about to go to high school. And for those listeners out there that have teenagers, you kind of, you really want to spend time with your kids, and it's really hard at that age. So I figured, well, if I'm his teacher, he has no choice, but at least I'll get to see him once a day for an hour. And so that started, I did, another 8 years in ag ed at the high school level, again, building community relationships, promoting the FFA program to our community, and looking for sponsorships and things like that. So that's how I got into agriculture education.
That's really interesting too. I've had several episodes with people where they really value the component of community too
Oh,
when it
yeah.
comes to veterinary medicine. Because especially if you are a veterinarian in a community, it is really important to understand your community that's around you, because that's who you're serving. And so that's also probably a lot of things that you can pull from understanding that into the veterinary setting as well.
Absolutely. And every 100% of the skills that I learned as a teacher transferred into managing a veterinary practice. 100%. There's nothing that you could ask me about teaching that I couldn't directly tie into managing a good veterinary practice. And so I tell people all the time, I'm like, if a school teacher walks into your office and they're like, I need a career change, hire them. And you're like, well, for what? It doesn't matter. If Just think about it. If they can manage a classroom of 25 kids, and then if they're a high school student, multiply that by 7 or 8 periods a day, or a high school teacher, I had 150 kids that would come through my classroom a day. And yeah, their skills are innumerable. So just hire them. If they're looking for a career change, put them in charge of something, whether it be client education or team building exercises, or they can fill out government paperwork like anybody. So, again, it was really easily transferable skills.
Yeah, my mother is a teacher, and she has taught every level at some point in her career. But, watching her and some of the skills that you have to learn, including patience, listening, yes, the crowd management, parent management, which, was probably going to come into play in vet med too, because a lot of these pets are treated like children. Yeah, no, I definitely see some parallels now that we're talking on that. And we may come back to this, but, one of the things, and I do not want to get you in trouble, so don't say anything that will get you in trouble here, but I'm very curious what it is like dating someone going through vet school, because it is a crazy 4 years. And so I'm curious to hear the spouse perspective watching that.
So my wife and I were friends before we started dating. So that was helpful. I, I was also super, so college was the best 8 years of my life too, and I am not a doctor. So do the math. I loved college. I was very involved in my fraternity. I was involved in student government. I was involved in the agriculture department at our school. And I worked full time outside of school. So, like, my last 2 years of being enrolled as a student, I was a part time student. I just did one class a semester because I was waiting for Amy to finish. But we weren't in the same city. So she was 150 miles away from me. And so she had her own life of school and doing her stuff at the same time I was finishing up mine. And we would talk every night when our cell phones would go to free. So we would talk every night for 1 hour starting at 9 o'clock Central Time, because that's when my cell phone was free. And I think that hour a night really helped us to communicate, and like we talked through a lot of different things. And so that was really helpful. I was also fascinated with what she was doing. But I remember one of the first times I went to visit her, one of our other doctors at our team, she was actually Amy's roommate, Dr. Robinson. So I remember one of the first times I went up there to visit them, and we went to a restaurant and sat down, and they pulled out their flashcards and started like quizzing each other. I'm like, what are y'all doing? Like, take a break. So I was like the little evil, person on their shoulder telling them, oh, just, it'll be fine. So I wasn't around my wife enough to pull her studies down. I guess I would just, and the other thing is, like, my wife and I are polar opposites of each other. And so we kind of balance each other out. But, I would go up there almost every weekend to visit, and we just made the most out of that time together. I understood that she was super stressed, and it wouldn't bother me. Like, I was happy, that time of our lives when you just love being in the presence of that person, right? Like, I was happy to sit and watch TV with subtitles on while she was studying. Like, that was enough. And I think you just have to really understand what they're going through. Now, fast forward 12 years later into our marriage, the first week of practice ownership, I had no idea what my wife did every day, right? So I was doing my own thing teaching, and she had no idea what I did every day. But when we owned our practice, I remember when we first started, it was her and 3 employees, and then me in the afternoon. There was one day that I came in, and I was the 4th person in line to ask her a question. And I remember seeing this look on her face, and I knew that look. And I was like, everybody, time out. We're taking a break. And I grabbed her and I took her outside, and I said, are you okay? And she just looked at me like, what have we done? And so I'm like, all right, we'll breathe. And so being able to recognize those stress points and things, but that's where I first realized, like, oh my gosh, everything, like the amount of stress that she's under was eye-opening for me. And even today, it's still challenging to know what she comes home. We have 3 kids, 2 are still here. Our oldest has moved out and doing his own thing now. But she has the stress of all day. And then we come home, we got food. Our kids are involved in a ton of different stuff. They want to talk to her. She feels the pressure of needing to be a good mom, needing to be a good business owner, needing to be a good veterinarian, and needing to be a good spouse. And that's a lot of stress on her. It's a lot of stress on me. We struggle with it still today. And being able to communicate is really, really important. So knowing in good times, like having a conversation in good times of how you're going to handle the bad times is really important.
Ooh, that's a good tip. Yeah, definitely. It is having those conversations when you're not in the heat of the stress. So
Yeah.
you kind of maybe you have a code word. It's
Sure.
like, okay, we're going into our plan that we've made. The support systems are so important. Just when you were describing vet school, you're talking about like that 1 hour, a night, or, having the weekends. I didn't date much in vet school, but something this actually started in vet school is a weekly phone call with my dad. And a weekly phone call with my family is a big deal. We don't talk on the phone. So that was a big deal.
Yeah.
But being able to check in into the world outside of vet school, have someone who cares about you, who's patient, who has some idea, because my dad is a doctor. So he understands that you just got to make it through these years. You got it. He's the one that taught me C equals MD, which, of course, for us is DVM.
Yep.
That didn't make me stop studying, but it does help in the moment. And so having that support system, and I like how you continue to build that support system as, her career's grown and yours has grown as well. And I'm sure you have started just from a different perspective, again, noticing things about the veterinary profession that can cause challenges on the whole team. You're experiencing it as well. But again, being able to have a slightly different perspective can be helpful as a support system as well.
Yeah. One thing that I think about veterinary medicine and veterinarians in particular is that your whole lives have been about competition.
Hmm.
You competed with your peers. Look at your peers, like look around at the vet med, look to the doctors to your right and left, especially at other practices. You don't typically see them as friends, you see them as competition. It would, and it's been that way since you were an undergrad. Like you stressed out as an undergrad because you were trying to build your resume to get into vet school. So you all wanted to be the leaders of school clubs. You wanted to be the best student. You wanted to have the best GPA. You wanted to be at the top of your class. Then you get accepted into vet school. I think that first year you all are all friends because you're like all stressed out and lost. And then as vet school continues on, here we go again. Now we're competing to be the best in the class. We're competing for the best internships, or maybe there's very limited scholarships, right? So you're competing for those limited scholarships that are available to you. You're competing for the best externships at the locations where you want to go. Then you get out and you're on your own and you're starting your careers. Maybe you're fighting for the best jobs when you graduate. Then maybe you move into practice ownership and you start to compete with each other for the clients and stuff. And so it's like this whole industry, your whole lives. First off, you're really driven individuals. And so you put a lot of personal, like stress that nobody else is even putting on you. You're putting it on yourself. And then you want to be the best doctor, right? And maybe in your practice, you're, especially if it's a production, you're competing for the cases that are going to produce. And so it's like competition, 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 competition. And you look up and you're like, I'm alone. I don't have anybody to talk to. Well, no, duh, because we've set up this system that like puts you against each other. And that was one of the things that Amy wanted to really work on at our practice, was creating a culture of support for each other. And what I've done, like I started a practice managers group in our area because I didn't know anything. And so I needed help. And it has taken years for people, I think, to really truly believe that I'm like, I'm not your competition. We're not competition. What's the scarcity mindset that we all are going into with? Like, there's enough clients for all of us. So why don't we help each other out? I share resumes with other practices. When people apply to work at our office, I send out not only veterinary assistants and CSRs, but also licensed technicians and also doctor resumes, because I have a waiting list of people that want to work at Family Pet Health. And I'm like, these are really great people. We need to keep them in the industry. So I share them with other people that have shown that they're trying to make the industry better by coming to our practice managers groups and helping each other. So those are the people I feed resumes to other people all the time, because, but I always tell them, here you go, hire them. But I am going to reach out to this person when I have an opening. So don't call me a poacher or whatever. Like, it's your job to keep them happy so they don't come over here and work. But that's one thing that I wish that vet med would do a better job of, is helping each other out, because I don't know, Dr. Sprinkle, what it's like to, I don't really know what it's like to go from a euthanasia into a puppy exam and then turn around and go and diagnose somebody's dog with cancer, and then go have a meeting with a new grad who started with us to help them about how to be better with client communications, and then go home and be a mom or a dad. Like, I kind of have an idea what that's like, but I don't really know. And the only people, like you said, are those that have walked in your shoes. And I would really encourage people to build a legitimate support system to help, so that you're not alone or don't feel alone.
Ooh, that's such a good call out. It's something I encourage as well. Is I think this is such a big little profession that we do need to make sure that we're encouraging each other and supporting. It's something I encourage as early as vet school. You're definitely correct. It's drilled into us, right? There's only so many seats in vet school. It's the most competitive. It's more competitive than medical school. So we're constantly told that. And a lot of times people are discouraging us along the way.
Right.
So all of that. And then,
And how many times have you heard a veterinarian say, "Oh, if I had to do it over again, I'd be a pharmacist instead," like a human pharmacist? Like, I'm like, this is not. And here we are. These kids are we have such a cool opportunity to show people that it can be done a better way. From working with high school students, they need to know the truth. It's hard. It's really, really hard. But God, don't poo poo on their dreams the moment you first meet them. Like, oh, I'd pick something else if I were you. I'm
Yeah.
sorry. I'm sorry your career was like that. That's terrible, but theirs doesn't have to be.
Oh, that's another good point. 'Cause
Mm.
I saw, of course, Reddit is never the best place to probably know if you want a happy story. But, there was a veterinarian on there and she was completely burnt out. And she basically said, I'm having to restrain myself from going into to the vet schools and telling them all to run for their life. And I'm just like, oh dear. So you're right. Just because you have a moment in your career and it could feel like the end of the world. I'm not trying to belittle burnout or challenges. The thing is that when we are communicating the challenges is learning how to communicate how to do things well, or like you talked about with your wife, in the times when you're not burnt out, not stressed out, what are some plans that you can have so when you start to notice those things, you can implement them and be able to get the support that you need? And I genuinely think support is one of the biggest things that we can start to create as early as possible. Make friends with your classmates in vet school. I mean, yes, as the economy changes, the job market may change. We're right now not it's not too hard to find a position. I think
Right.
we're okay. Maybe not quite as hot as maybe a couple years ago, but I'm not too worried that, we can employ veterinarians right now. So don't worry about that. Just be your best human being self you can be. Make connections. Honestly, that's the best way to get a job is being a good person and
Yeah.
building relationships. So not that that's an evil mindset of doing it, but just FYI. But yeah, that's the forming the support networks, I think, is where it's at and continuing as adults. And you talked about building these relationships. And it was funny because I was listening to a podcast and they were talking about how loneliness is such an epidemic and adults making friends is hard.
I was
And
gonna
so,
say that a minute ago. I even wrote a note on here that's like, it's really hard to make friends as an adult because kinda like at first, that's where I was going with that story about vet school. It's like, so take that and then add it to the fact that it's just harder to make friends as adults because and the reasons are because, like, when we are growing up, we're doing everything together with our peers. From kindergarten way through high school and even into college, you're with the same group of people as you're moving through the same stage of life. And here, if you said, "I'm a veterinarian," that does not mean that your experiences are the same as the other veterinarian beside you because you might be a new grad. They might be 50 years out of school. You might be an associate vet. They might be a relief vet. They might be a practice owner. They might have a practice owner with 5 associates versus a single doctor practice. And all of those are so stinking different that you're like, I don't, I, honest, this sounds bad, but like, I also don't want to be friends with people that just complain to me all the time about their problems. Like, I need you to listen to my problems too, but, it's just harder to find people, I think, as you get older because life takes so many different paths out from the time that whether we enter the world as an 18-year-old out of high school or a 25-year-old out of veterinary school. It's just different. But
it is. But then going back to as you made this practice management group is the growth mindset is that we can all support each other, learn from each other. It's actually great that we have some different perspectives because
absolutely.
as a new grad, I want to learn from the person who's been in practice a good 10 years because they've gone through all of this before. It's important to listen to that 50-year vet too, but just know that their experience is probably very
Yeah.
different than what you're going through. So definitely is find those people that are just a few steps ahead of you and the vets that are 10 years out, they can learn from new grads as well. I've had, Danny, who I'm going to say it wrong, Vet Set Go, talks about a lot of the new grads coming out. They know medicine very well. And in fact, some things they know better than her because they've just read the textbooks. Right.
Yep.
And so we can all learn from each other. And that's, I think, what helps is knowing we're different. That's good. Have the growth mindset of learning and supporting each other. That's where I think it can all come to that beautiful place where we find the support that we need.
At my church, they talk about discipleship, and they say on your spiritual walk, it's important to have three people: a mentor, someone that can help guide you. You need to have somebody that's on your same level, that's walking through life at the same stage you are, so you can do it together. And then you need to be a mentor to someone that's younger in their spiritual journey as well. And I think that that's good career advice too. Like, find a mentor, be a mentor, and then do life with some other people around you too. I think it's good. I think it's good advice for just whatever you're looking at.
Yeah, no, I love that too. So I want to come back to family pet health because you have done some amazing things with this practice that I think is just cool. And so, do you mind kind of coming back to your wife comes to you and says, "Let's own a practice," and you're like, "Okay, well,
Yeah,
let's
let's
learn
do
this
it.
together." And kind of what you were learning, because again, you said while you brought in very, very helpful skills being an agricultural teacher, this is still a little different situation. So there
Oh
are
yeah.
still some things to learn. What did you learn? And because she came to you specifically, good question. Why do you want to practice? That's good. And it was around culture and the human beings. So how did you, with that as your goal, and you're learning how to put a practice together? What were some of your steps, and what did you learn along the way?
The number one thing that I would say is the foundation for successful practice is a clear vision. So you need to put real thought into that. And that's what I challenged her to do. So she left her practice that she has been at for 10 years. She had a non-compete, like so many, unfortunately, veterinarians do. And we thought about challenging that. Probably could have won, but it probably would have. So we just decided, hey, look, let's end it. You got 2 years before you can work in Murfreesboro again. So she became a relief veterinarian and she worked all over Middle Tennessee. And what was crazy to me was that a lot of those practices didn't really ask her to do very much. They just wanted her there in case their clients needed her while they were on vacation, which was odd, but it gave her a great opportunity to work on her business plan. And so she went to our small business development center, and anybody that's out there thinking about starting a business, see if your chamber of commerce or local universities have a small business center. Many of them do because it's part of the small business administration through the federal government. And so she went to some classes where they talked about what do you want to do, and they talked, what do you want to be? What is the most important things for you? You're the one that's going to have to go work there every day. So it doesn't have to be the practice for your employees. It has to be the practice for you. It's yours. What do you want that to be? Do you want to make the most money? Do you want to have the best life, like balance? You want to be cat only? You want to be dog only? What do you want to do? And so, and I couldn't do that for her. And so if I created a vet hospital and then employed her to work for me, she still might have been miserable, right? But we have built family pet health around what she wanted because she was the number one veterinarian. And what we have done since then is we have recruited other people that share her vision. And now the vision for family pet health, as we have grown over the past almost 7 years, is it's a shared vision from everyone that works inside our hospital, and everyone contributes to our vision. So every year we reevaluate our core values and our mission statements, our purpose statement, our 5-year goals, our 3-year goals, our single year goal, and we all are on the same page. And I tell people, if at any time you want to get off the family pet health bus, you just tell me to pull over and we will let you off. And that will end well. We will bid you adieu and wish you all the best. But if we have to throw you off the bus because you are bringing us all down, then it's not going to end well. So just, if you're not happy here, just let me know, because we're not changing. This is what we're doing. It is spelled out. It is on our wall. Everybody can reference it at any time. If they're like, what are we doing here? Go look at it. And if at any time your plans change from what we are saying we're doing as a practice, then get off our bus and empty that seat out for somebody else that is going where we're going. And that is the key. That's what it's all about. Everything else is secondary, right? Whether you have a therapy laser or not is not whether you're going to be happy at your job or not. It's going to be like, are we practicing the kind of medicine that I want to practice? Or am I dealing with the kind of clients that I want to deal with? Am I working with the kind of people that I want to work with every day? And all of that is vision. So That's my, like, it's all about that. That's what I say. But, you still have to run a profitable business and stuff. But how do we have those discussions? Like, we're having those discussions right now. I'm like, hey, we have got to fix this schedule because these holes that we have in these schedules is going to run us out of business if we don't fix it. And so we can have those kind of conversations without people having their feelings hurt, or they might get them hurt for a minute, but they're going to be like, okay, yeah, I know we got to have this difficult conversation. But we just keep going back to the vision. We all agreed that this was our 5-year goal. The only way we're going to get there is if we do X, Y, and Z, which we all agreed to. If we're not going to do that, then we need to huddle back up and decide what are we going to do. And sometimes I'm be like, hey, we're not changing this plan. So if you don't like that plan, then you need to go somewhere else. And that's not a hateful conversation. It's a supportive conversation, I think.
Have you ever had like something come up where you being the husband of a doctor is a sticky situation?
Well, nobody's complained to me. Yeah. So, that's a big fear of ours, right?
Yeah.
Like, you hear plenty of horror stories about husband and wife teams. And I don't think that that's been a problem at Family Pet Health. That's not to say that we've been without drama or conflict. There are times when some stuff from home might bleed over into the office, but we don't work together very much. I'm not involved in the medical delivery of services. If you walk into the hospital and see me holding pets for blood draws, there's a problem. Like, we are scraping the bottom of the barrel. It's not that I don't know how to do it. Like I said, that's what I did that was my first job as an 18-year-old, was being a vet assistant. I'm Fear-Free Elite certified. I know what's going on. I know our protocols and stuff, but if you see me in the surgery suite scrubbed in, we got issues. Like, and we have systems in place where if I have to quote unquote get onto somebody, it's not a big deal. It's what it is. It's like, we have a protocol. It wasn't followed. Why? And then we find out why, and then we fix it. And I don't think that there's been a lot of drama from, like, nobody would ever go to Dr. Shirley to ask a question, not get the answer that they want, and then come to me. That would never that has never happened. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because that's not the way our systems are set up, our protocols and stuff.
Well, yeah, first of all, I just thought that would be something somebody would wonder. It's like,
Yeah.
fully were you in their thoughts?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we just did our SWOT analysis back in December. We did our leadership retreat, and we went away. And one of the strengths, weaknesses, opportunity, and threats. And every year, a threat that is listed is, what happens if the Shirleys get a divorce? And I'm like, that means I'm dead. Like, I'm not, like, we're in it forever. But what if the Shirleys don't want to work together anymore? Like, that is a threat. And that's legitimate. If something happens to my marriage, what happens to Family Pet Health? And that's a legitimate question for my team to ask. It's something that we talk about in the interview process. That's one of our questions. Have you ever worked for a husband and wife ownership team? Or have you ever heard any horror stories about that? Do you have any concerns about that? I would say at the size of our practice now, that's not it's not as much of a threat now. We actually, it's on our issues list that the new threat is, what happens if the Shirleys die at the same time? And you're like, oh God, I'm like, why are they talking about this? Because it's a threat. It's a legitimate question. And does my team know the plan? Because my attorney knows the plan and my family knows the plan. We have all the stuff set up to take care of our children, but not everybody at our office knew the plan. And so that's something that I have to do. I have to deliver that to the team. It's like, okay, here's the worst case scenario plan, and here's what we're going to do, and here's our vision for what happens to Family Pet Health. So it's totally a legitimate question.
Yeah. And I like how you kind of just go ahead and ask about the elephant in the room. You're like, we need to have this as an open conversation, because it's important, because I always say, if you do not help bring out the narrative, people make up the narrative in their head. So if you don't get it.
In the absence of facts, people will create their own stories, right? Exactly. I think that's in the book, Crucial Conversations. If you don't provide the facts and talk about it, people are left to create their own narratives, and buddy, will they ever. And it usually will not even be close to the truth.
Right. It's like absolute worst case.
Let's talk about it. And that's the
Yeah.
same if you're having a problem with a coworker. Assume good intent or assume noble intent until proven otherwise. And there have been times where we have had some really crucial conversations with somebody that used to work on our team. And I said, I want to make sure that I'm addressing the issue and not creating something. I was like, and here's what I feel. And I said something, and they're like, nope, that's right. And I was like, okay, well, that's not going to work here. And they're like, well, I'm not going to do this. I said, okay, well, then you're not going to work here. Okay. And then that conversation was over and we moved on. And so you got to talk about it. If you're feeling uncertain about it, best to just talk about it and just say, if I'm having a problem with you, I might say, Dr. Sprinkle, not you. I'm going to say, I feel this. Am I right? And and then that puts it back to you to say yes or no. And if the answer is yes, you're right, then I'm like, okay, well, we have to talk about it this way. And other times there'll be like, oh my God, no, I didn't mean that at all. I'm like, oh, okay, great. Well, I was feeling really insecure. And so you're like, oh, I didn't mean that. And so then you leave and you're happy. So versus stewing on it.
Exactly. And kind of along the similar lines, because I noticed this is what you were doing with your wife. You have conversations outside of the challenge. You plan on what are we going to do if and when a challenge happens. Similarly to the hospital, you guys talk while there's not an issue about these are our values. This is the vision. If anything happens, this is the process that we're going. You said systems. Systems are great. And so that way it's not a surprise when those things break down. You're like, oh, easy.
It should never be a surprise when someone has to be let go, right? And let's see, I have it in here. So, okay, here it is. This is number 5 on my list of all I ever needed to know about managing a vet hospital. I learned teaching high school.
Oh,
The short version is leadership lessons from teenagers. Number 5, clear expectations make everyone more successful and happy. High school students love conflict. And buddy, I'm good at it too. Like I can fight. I love to debate for no other reason than just to debate because I'm bored today. Let's talk about politics and religion at the same time. But in my classroom, I had very few rules in my classroom, but I had a lot of protocols. And when you break a protocol, here's the response. And it's the same at our office. We don't have a lot of rules. We have a lot of protocols. And guess what? Protocols can change. And protocols can be talked about and developed, and protocols can be different for your office versus my office. And same thing in my classroom, I had 7 periods a day, and my rules for the first period were not the same as third period because first period was seniors and third period was freshmen. And if you think you can treat the two of them the same, you are very mistaken. And so the protocols for an emergency only clinic are very different than the protocols for a general practice. And so it's unfair to hold everybody to the same, like these are the vet med protocols, right? But the rules are the same. Treat our clients with respect, treat each other with respect, never lie. And there we go. That's pretty much it. And the rest of it is all protocols. And the best time to write protocols and adjust them is when you've had problems. Write them when it's calm and evaluate them after a crisis to see if they worked and when tensions have gone back down to normal levels. So that's another little piece of advice that I might have for people out there.
yeah. I mean, it's hard to be able to predict everything that happens. I mean, the reason that we have our laws outside of vet med is because that probably happened. So they had to make a law about it.
Right.
So, I mean, and there's some pretty crazy laws and you're like, really, that happened?
Well, the other thing that's part of Dr. Shirley's first homework about creating her practice. So we had our vision and we had our core values. So when we started, our core values were Dr. Shirley's and mine because we were the only 2 employees before we even opened, right? It was just us. I'm like, well, what do you want them to be? I'm like, well, what do you want them to be? And we both settled on 3 things. We wanted to be a blessing to our community and to our employees. Education was super important to both of us. So we wanted to educate our staff. Our team needed to focus on education. client education was the other one. And then our third core value, so we have B for blessing, E for education, and the last one was G for growth. And we wanted to grow. We wanted to grow our business. We wanted to grow our relationships with our clients, and we wanted to grow our team. We wanted to have a healthy business, right? So that was stood for BEG, B-E-G. We said we wanted people to beg to come to Family Pet Health. And that was our core values. Those were our 3 core values up until we started in 2018. And I think we redid our core values in 2021, maybe 2020 or 2021. We reevaluated them and we changed our core values to expect. We love acronyms. So the E, so it's experience, positivity, education, connection, and trust. Those are our core values now. And in every room of our office, we have a poster that says what you can expect at Family Pet Health. And then expect has our core values listed. Here's the point of the story. I'm bringing it back around. When you can't plan for everything, as you just said, you can't plan for everything. But what I drill into our team is that you're going to have to respond. Dr. Sprinkle is going to have to respond in a time of crisis. How's she going to respond? We don't have a protocol for this. What are we going to do? I tell them, you have to problem solve, and you're never going to get fired for making a decision, even if I don't agree with it. When we talk later, when we're evaluating it, I'm going to say, Dr. Sprinkle, when this happened, you did this. Tell me how that decision relates back to our core values. And then I'm going to shut up and listen to what you have to say. And after I listen, I'm going to see, did you tie those back to our core values? Well, you're like, well, these people didn't have any money and this and this and this, and I did this and that and this. And so here's how I wanted to do the experience. And we educated them on this, and I'm building trust. I'm like, okay, I appreciate that. I can see how you came to that resolution. Now let's talk about it. We may reevaluate what you did and then talk about it like in the future, here's what we need to do. And I might have been wrong. I'm like, you know what? I wouldn't have done it I didn't think I would do it that way. But after hearing what you said and looking through the options, you're exactly right. You handled that great. Thanks. Good job. So our team at Family Pet Health knows our core values. They're drilled into their head. They may forget a protocol. And I may say, hey, we have a protocol for this. I totally forgot. And I say, okay, well, how did this decision relate back to our core values? And if you can do that, then we're going to be okay. I'm just going to say, hey, next time, let's remember the protocol that we already had written, or we just created a new one.
Just to kind of take this home for everyone, you can do this personally too. It's what I talk about is having your personal value. So if you're trying to make a career decision or, anything, you have that to go back to, because you're right. You may not have a protocol or a system for everything because you can't predict everything in life. So I think it's something you can apply. A lot of what we've talked about can apply in life in general. And so I think this has been great to see how you have, made your career in veterinary medicine and how you're supporting the industry with your unique perspective. And I really appreciate what you do. I know that I'll talk more about the podcast to promote it. I love that that's an education, being able to have this podcast for your community, to be able to talk to them and build trust by building that relationship outside of the handful of times that they come into the vet clinic. I think that's really special, not to mention that you enjoy it. And I think that's important too, is to find things you enjoy.
Well, I think so. And I'll be honest, like, I don't think Dr. Shirley asked me the other day in the morning while we were getting ready, she goes, are you ready to find your replacement yet? And I was like, are you about to fire me? And she goes, no, I'm just asking you. And I'm like, she gets me. Like, I don't think I'll be doing this in another 5 years. I'm starting to look for my replacement as the visionary of Family Pet Health, because I started out in this journey, not because I wanted to own a veterinary practice, but because I wanted to support my wife. And it just happened to be that the things that she needed the most to get her dream done were the things I was really good at. And now I'm like, what's next? What's next? I was like, I've always had a dream of starting a catfish farm. And so, but it's not, there's a whole joke about that I could tell another podcast, but like, I have like my next dream, like the next thing, if you're like, what are you up to? What's your long-term vision? I want to create a retreat center that is geared towards small veterinary offices and also 4-H teams and FFA teams where they can come and learn about vision and communication skills and stuff, and then go back and put it into action in their vet hospitals or in their teams. I also have a real desire to work with fraternities and sororities at the college level, because that's like, I love teaching and I need to get back into that or I'm going to wither up and die. Right. So like the vet office day-to-day stuff is starting to get kind of boring and mundane. Right. And so I'm like, but what I found was a few years ago, we switched to using something called Traction or EOS. And I got to offload a lot of those things that were really burning me out personally and gave them to somebody that loves doing them. And so we're both happier and our business is doing better. And I can see myself doing this for another 5 or 6 years or maybe even longer if I build our support team to continue to take those things that are kind of boring to me, but are really, really important, like paying the bills. You know, you got to do that every month. Dang it. And so anyway, that's kind of, I think everybody out there probably has strengths that they really enjoy. And I would challenge you, like, build your veterinary career in those areas so that you're happier. And there's places out there that will allow you to do that.
Yeah. And you can always take those strengths into something new like you are looking to do. So I think that's a great message. And I always like to end with, what is something that you are very grateful for right now?
I am grateful for, man, so many things. I'll tell you right now, like what's on my heart right now is like, I'm really thankful for this time that I have with my daughter to do the theater stuff. Every day we get to drive to rehearsal and I get that one-on-one time to talk with her. And yeah, I'm also really nervous, but about singing on stage and dancing. But I'm really thankful that she, for now, as a 13-year-old young lady, still wants to hang out with her dad.